My grandmother's will required her grandchildren to eliminate each other from inheritance. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who waited while I signed for it with shaking hands. The envelope was thick cream paper with my grandmother's monogram embossed in gold, the same stationery she'd used for birthday cards and Christmas notes my entire life. Inside, her familiar handwriting covered 3 pages in careful script, each word deliberate and precise as everything else she'd ever done. My dearest Natalia, it began. If you are reading this, I have passed away and my attorney has begun executing my final wishes. What follows may shock you, but I assure you every decision has been made with careful consideration and deep love for all my grandchildren. I sat at my kitchen table reading those opening lines over and over, trying to understand why receiving a letter from my deceased grandmother felt like the beginning of something terrible. She'd died 2 weeks earlier at 91, surrounded by family in the mansion where she'd lived her entire adult life. The funeral had been elegant and somber, exactly as she would have wanted. I have watched each of you grow into remarkable young adults, and I am proud of the people you have become. However, I have also observed troubling patterns of entitlement and complacency among my grandchildren. You have grown accustomed to the comfort my wealth provides without truly understanding its value or the responsibility that comes with it. My stomach started churning as I read those words. Grandmother Evelyn had always been stern but fair, expecting excellence from everyone around her while providing unwavering support. She'd paid for private schools, college tuitions, and graduate programs for all 7 of her grandchildren without ever making us feel like we owed her anything. The idea that she saw us as entitled felt like a betrayal. Therefore, I have designed what I call the worthiness assessment. Over the next 6 months, you and your 6 cousins will participate in a series of challenges designed to test your character, intelligence, resourcefulness, and commitment to family values. At the end of this period, only 1 grandchild will inherit my estate in its entirety. The others will receive nothing. The words blurred as I stared at them, my coffee growing cold in my hands. This couldn't be real. Grandmother Evelyn had always preached about family unity and supporting each other. The woman who taught me to braid friendship bracelets and shared her secret recipe for apple pie couldn't have designed a system to pit us against each other. The assessment will be administered by my trusted attorney, Mr. Whitmore, who has detailed instructions regarding each phase. Your first challenge begins immediately and will test your response to this news. How you handle this information and interact with your cousins over the next 72 hours will determine your initial ranking. I dropped the letter and reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts to find my cousin David's number. We were the closest in age and had always been allies during family gatherings. If anyone would help me make sense of this insanity, it would be him. Nat, thank God you called, David answered on the first ring. Did you get the letter? Please tell me you got the same insane letter I got. The worthiness assessment, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She wants us to eliminate each other from inheritance. David, this can't be real. I'm sitting in my car outside Whitmore's office right now. I drove here as soon as I finished reading it. The receptionist confirmed he's expecting all 7 of us to schedule individual meetings this week. She wouldn't tell me anything else, but Nat. She looked at me like she pitied me. The reality of the situation started sinking in as I heard the strain in David's voice. This wasn't some elaborate joke or misunderstanding. Our grandmother had genuinely designed a competition where 6 of her grandchildren would be left with nothing. Have you talked to anyone else yet? I asked, already dreading the answer. That's the thing. The letter specifically says we're being monitored starting now. How we handle this information, whether we try to coordinate or conspire, it's all part of the first test. I wanted to call everyone immediately, but what if that's exactly what she doesn't want us to do? I walked to my window and stared out at the street where I'd grown up, where grandmother Evelyn had lived just 3 blocks away in her Victorian mansion. She used to walk to our house every Sunday for dinner, bringing fresh flowers from her garden and stories about her week. The woman I remembered wouldn't have created a system designed to destroy family relationships. We need more information, I said finally. I'm calling Whitmore and scheduling a meeting for today. We can figure out how to handle this after we understand what we're actually dealing with. Nat, wait. What if the first test is seeing who calls the attorney first? What if being proactive helps us or hurts us? We don't know the rules. David's paranoia was starting to affect me, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me completely. Then I guess I'll find out. I'd rather take action than sit here wondering what she wanted from us. Mr. Whitmore's office occupied the top floor of a downtown building that had been elegant decades ago, but now felt tired and forgotten. The elevator creaked as it climbed, and the hallway smelled like old carpet and disappointment. His receptionist, a woman in her 70s with carefully styled gray hair, looked up when I entered and smiled with what might have been sympathy. You must be one of Mrs. Holloway's grandchildren, she said in a gentle voice. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you, dear. He's been preparing for these meetings for months. The attorney's office was exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd worked with my grandmother for 40 years. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and photographs of distinguished-looking people in expensive frames. Mr. Whitmore himself was tall and thin, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Natalia, please sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his massive desk. I imagine you have questions about your grandmother's final wishes. I need to understand what she was thinking, I said without preamble. This assessment idea, it's not like her. She always taught us that family was more important than money. Mr. Whitmore opened a thick folder and removed a document I recognized as my grandmother's will. The official version was much longer than the letter I'd received, filled with legal terminology and specific instructions that made my head spin. Your grandmother spent 2 years planning this assessment, he said carefully. She consulted with child psychologists, business strategists, and family counselors to design something she believed would reveal each grandchild's true character. She was deeply concerned about the impact of inherited wealth on young people. But why eliminate 6 of us completely? Why not just distribute the money differently? She felt that partial inheritance would still enable what she called comfortable mediocrity. She wanted to ensure that whoever received her fortune would truly value it and use it responsibly. In her words, the assessment would identify the grandchild most likely to honor her legacy. I stared at the will, trying to process the magnitude of what my grandmother had planned. Her estate was worth over $15 million, including the mansion, her art collection, and various investments. Losing access to that inheritance would completely change the trajectory of any of our lives. How does the assessment work? I asked. 6 challenges over 6 months. Each challenge tests different qualities she valued: integrity, intelligence, compassion, leadership, resourcefulness, and family loyalty. You'll receive detailed instructions before each phase, and your performance will be evaluated by independent judges she selected before her death. Independent judges? Community leaders, business professionals, and family friends who knew your grandmother well. People she trusted to evaluate her grandchildren fairly. Their identities will remain confidential throughout the process to prevent any attempts at influence or manipulation. The whole system was more elaborate than I'd imagined, and somehow that made it more frightening. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in grief or illness. My grandmother had spent years crafting a methodical process to determine which of her grandchildren deserved her fortune. Mr. Whitmore, can I ask you something? Do you think this is fair? He was quiet for a long moment, removing his glasses to clean them slowly. When he looked at me again, his expression was carefully neutral. Your grandmother was one of the most thoughtful people I've ever known. She never made important decisions impulsively. Whether I agree with this approach personally is irrelevant. My job is to execute her wishes exactly as she intended. That evening, I drove to the coffee shop where my cousins and I had agreed to meet. The letter had specifically mentioned that our interactions during the first 72 hours would be monitored and evaluated, but none of us could stand the isolation of processing this alone. David was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open and papers spread across the table. My cousin Sophie walked in a few minutes later, her usually perfect makeup smudged from crying. She'd always been the most emotional of our group, and the stress was clearly destroying her. "This is insane," Sophie said as she slumped into the booth. "I called my parents and they acted like they knew this was coming, like they've been preparing for it. How long have the adults known about this assessment?" "The whole family knew," David said grimly, looking up from his laptop screen. "I've been researching inheritance law all afternoon. Whitmore filed the will with the court 6 months ago. Our parents, our aunts and uncles, everyone knew what was coming and nobody warned us." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had our grandmother designed this competition, but our entire extended family had kept it secret. They'd watched us plan our futures, make financial decisions, and build expectations around inheritance money they knew we might never receive. "Where is everyone else?" I asked, looking around the nearly empty coffee shop. "That's the most messed up part," Sophie said. "Rebecca and James aren't coming. Rebecca said she doesn't want to be seen conspiring with us because it might hurt her chances. James said the same thing. They're already treating us like competition instead of family." My youngest cousins, twins Alexis and Nathan, arrived together looking shell-shocked. They were both 21 and had been planning to use their inheritance to start a nonprofit organization. The idea that their grandmother's money might not materialize was devastating to them. "I don't understand how she could do this to us," Alexis said as she sat down. "We're her grandchildren. We loved her. How could she turn us against each other like this?" Nathan pulled out his phone and showed us a text message. "Rebecca sent this an hour ago. She says anyone who participates in group meetings is showing weakness and poor strategic thinking. She's already positioning herself as the serious candidate who understands the rules." The text was cold and calculating, nothing like the Rebecca I'd grown up with. She'd always been competitive, but she'd also been loyal to family. The assessment was already changing how we saw each other and how we saw ourselves. "What do we do?" Sophie asked. "If we work together, are we breaking the rules? If we don't work together, are we abandoning each other?" "I think that's exactly what she wanted," David said.